If you're an entrepreneur, creator, or professional who's tired of feeling stuck and ready to take bold ownership of your life and career, this episode is for you.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion, my words got power, my thoughts have action, motivation, stay gracious, that's greatness, be audacious, motivation, be audacious, innovation, be audacious, inspiration, be bold, motivation, be audacious.
My mom looked at that and she's like, okay, these kids are actually collapsing. So she told us, look, guys, so this is your village estate. However, you guys are out of school, you're heading cattle, you end up, getting to 18, getting married and and this becomes your life. Do you want that, or should we risk everything, leave all of this stuff behind and go start a new life in the closest town? We'll be poorer, we'll be like really broke, but at least we'll have agency. And you guys can go back into school and they can start hustling and we can start building our life from scratch.
What if the real reason you're not where you want to be isn't a lack of effort, but that your effort isn't aligned with the direction of your vision? On this podcast, our goal is simple. It's to help you live your best audacious life ever by challenging comfort zones, redefining success, and empowering you to take bold, intentional action in your own journey. Today's guest is Joseph Rutakangwa. He's the founder of a decision AI company and author of a book, Never Stay Broke. His story is powerful. From growing up in wealth, losing everything, rebuilding from the ground up, and eventually leading an AI-driven enterprise, Joseph embodies resilient, strategic thinking and audacious growth. Personally, this conversation mattered to me because Joseph's journey reflects something I deeply believe in, that adversity isn't the end of your story. It's often the beginning of your most audacious chapter. So without any further ado, let's get into our conversation with Joseph. Like I said, he has so much to offer, and I am certain that you will walk away with some insights from him. So with all that said, let's turn to Joseph. Hey, Joseph, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you for taking the time to be here, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, that's great. We spend much time on this podcast encouraging individuals to live their best audacious lives. And, a real big part of that is just understanding the whole concept of sort of taking bold risks, bold steps, exploring, breaking barriers. Sometimes you got to redefine your own success. All these sort of things fall into what audacious, living means and what it's about, which very much is in line with the work that you do in the AI space. And AI, is a very, very, very hot topic. We've got people from all over the world that are trying to figure it out. Some have jumped into the pool, some have stuck their toe in it, some don't want to touch it at all. Like it's a wide cross section. So I think now more than ever is just a wonderful time to engage in a dialogue in terms of what it's all about and really, how it can make a difference in our lives. You've written a book as well about this topic, and we'll get into that as well. But maybe as a starting point, if you can talk to our audience a little bit about yourself, the work you do, and what's got you to the point that you're at now.
Yeah, thank you so much for that brief intro. And it's true, like AI is our big revolutionary technology now that's changing our lives. And of course, I jumped into it myself. I run Ruazi, which is a decision AI platform for enterprise teams to help them drive growth. So the way it works is we trained and built our AI system based on real consumer activity in the real world, but we captured that data from voluntary shared an approach, which is zero-party data, voluntarily shared by consumers during their normal default consumption activities of both products and services. And we use that to train our brain, which is called Senna. And Senna is a decision AI that is based heavily on context, on the consumer's context. We have consumers from across 6,000 plus languages, 190 countries. So, and millions of them generating billions and billions of data points every day. And that training enables Senna to help companies solve three main problems. The first one is capturing, retaining, and growing the market share. The second one is decreasing the cost of consumer acquisition. Because right now, currently in the economy that we're in right now, we have so many products from, China, India, very competitively priced, and consumers are looking at all these different products and services, and the biggest driver is price. And you
Right.
have other drivers like durability and so on. So Senna helps companies, both large companies and medium-sized enterprises, be able to capture market share, hold it, and also grow over time. The second piece is because it's very difficult to compete.
Mhm.
The cost of acquiring consumers is up because of advertising. You have to spend more in advertising and so on. So Senna helps these enterprise teams figure out what kind of messaging will drive more ad performance, what kind of like product price point and so forth to lower the cost of acquiring these consumers. And lastly, the job is to increase the lifetime value per consumer, which is, well,
Okay.
once you've acquired these consumers, are they coming back? Are they coming back to buy more stuff? Are they buying more stuff more frequently? And are they spending more? Now, to get that done, you have to make sure that your product or service is actually matching what a consumer is looking for. So you
Okay.
can't do these tricks of creating a terrible product and then spending a lot in ads and hoping that people are going to like you're going to lie to people and and people are going to buy that over time. So Senna helps create that merge between the actual existing demand from consumers, the consumers purchasing power and their ability to afford your products and services, and helps you generate products and adjust your products and pricing and positioning to be able to meet consumer demand where it is, which helps you now generate more lifetime value per consumer. So that's what we do
Right.
at Wise. We've been around 4 years, but leading up to it, so how did I
Mhm.
get
Yeah.
into space?
Because you're an artist too, right? So let's all
Yes.
let's
Oh,
and,
yes, yes.
and so to go from one to the other, it's a big for some people. That's a huge leap, right? Like,
Yes, 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 100%. I'll talk to you about that. So, the way I got into Rwazi, I was doing consulting for 8 years leading up to starting Rwazi in 2021. So I started consulting when I went to Lehigh University out in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, for a summer program. It's a summer, business program for like mid-career individuals. I was young at the time. I was 21, so I wasn't quite qualified, but I'd done a lot of things in my life to kind of get into a program. And that program opened my eyes and introduced me into the world of business. Now, I was coming from the world of development programs with non-governmental organizations, and I had learned that, well, you can't really, drive large progress, societal progress via donations and things like that. The most effective way at that time that I'd, figured out was, well, you need these large companies to be able to generate more revenue and expand successfully across multiple markets, because if they do so, they're able to add more smaller service providers. This is how you get, small size companies
right.
because they become service providers to all these giants. And when you do that, they generate jobs and so on. So I started, from Lehigh, I started getting a lot of large companies hiring me, as an independent consultant to
Hmm.
help them generate more revenue from their international markets. So the equation would be the same more or less for 8 years, which was of our existing international markets, which market should we invest more in? With what products from our existing, portfolio of products,
Okay.
at targeting what consumer base, through which sales channels, at what price point, with what messaging, and so on to generate our desired ROI. So that was my thing. So I was very good at it. But over time, I learned that, well, these large companies, multi-billion dollar companies, they don't have the data, so they actually can't see the real, consumer activity across all these markets that they want to expand through. So we started with the infrastructure of, well, how do you actually get all this, massive volumes of like consumer activity? And then how do you generate a good decision system? Because most
Okay.
companies, even the big ones, they rely on the experience of their managers, experience of their executives to kind of like make those calls. They, good gut calls. So you're like, oh, looking at the data, my gut says XYZ, right? Or looking at the performance from last year, this is what my gut says. Let's go here. But the problem here is, well, if you heavily rely on your gut in a market that's extremely competitive and cutthroat, like if you sleep on your market share, you might find yourself sleeping forever into, into shutting down or something like that. It's much, you saw what happened with AB and Bev with their Bud Light products. That's like a
Mhm.
gut call. Make a gut call. It costs billions of dollars in
Right.
losses because this was an experienced marketing VP, but they just made the wrong gut call. You saw what happened with Jaguar, right? Jaguar, they went all electric, terrible, terrible gut call. But
Mhm.
that CEO, the CEO of Jaguar, is 30. It's been there for 30 years. Like he
Right.
knows, he knows what he's
Right.
doing. But
Right.
in this age, you can't rely on gut calls. They're too expensive,
Mm.
and they can tank the entire company, even an old company like Jaguar. So we're
But
now in
almost, sorry to cut you. I want to cut you, but
yes,
I think it's a really good point when you talk about gut
yes,
calls. I think what now it can't. I think there was a time where you could make calls on your gut alone, right?
yes,
Now
yes,
I think what's happening is because and really we don't need to make them on that alone because we have
yes,
access to so much information.
yes,
So if you
yes,
compare what your gut says with
yes,
verifiable actual data,
yes.
that's the key.
Exactly, exactly. And verifiable actual data now, most of the companies can generate data, right? So,
Right.
like Jaguar, of course, Jaguar has data on who the customers are, what they're buying, what kind of parts they like, what kind of modifications they make to their cars. They have the data, but they have too much data that they can't correctly make sense out of it and generate relationships across data points fast enough with normal analytics tools or a normal human brain. So this is where decision AI comes in. So what decision AI does, like for instance, our product Senna, when you're engaging with Senna, Senna is looking at let's say you're Jaguar, you're selling cars, and you're using Senna. Senna is looking at, yes, your internal, let's say customer feedback data, sales data, and all of that, but looking at that in relation to all external data, like the external data on all sorts of services and products. So you can't realize that there's a relationship between cars and video streaming services. You can't see a relationship between people buying cars and people buying, microphones and earphones, headphones and phone. Like you don't see that relationship. We don't
Right.
see a relationship between clothes and yogurt, right? We don't see that relationship, but AI does. The AI
Mm.
says that, like right now, our AI can say because Joseph likes buying Ralph Lauren and likes, New Balance shoes and Nikes and da. He is most likely to buy this type of yogurt, and it's shockingly accurate. Like you fall out of your chair if you see how accurate that is. And we just don't see how that relationship can be
Yeah.
built.
You can't see the connection.
That
Yeah.
we can't. There's no connection. But that's the power of AI. So you make the gut call after you've seen AI generate recommendations for you. So in our case, Senna, builds those connections and uncovers demand signals you should be paying attention to and tells you the recommended moves. So these are the moves, these are the areas you should exploit first, and these are the moves you should make, and these are the simulated outcomes. Now it's up to you to start, discussing, like, well, you recommended these moves, but the problem is I only have, let's say $1 million in budget or
Right.
$10,000 in budget. I can't go after that thing, so what else should I do? And then now you start figuring out, now that's where your gut code starts coming in. You're figuring out, okay, now based on my contexts, right? This is what, these are my constraints. This is what I'm inclined to do. Maybe I don't want to target this consumer segment because of XY reason. And then you discuss with Senna because it's a co-pilot and then start executing. So that's the power. So you're using
Mm.
AI as your like second brain, right?
Yes.
And people have a fear today, which they say, well, AI is going to make us dumber. Like, we're going to be lazy. Yeah. We're going to be lazy because we're using AI and won't be able to think for ourselves. I've been using AI a lot, and I've gotten sharper and sharper from using AI because when you're interacting with AI, you're forced to pay more attention to detail than you used to because you don't want to make a decision or make a move based on a recommendation that
Yes.
you don't think is true. So everything you're getting from AI, your brain is forced to cross-check and verify
Right.
and make sure you're testing, so you
Right.
become even more sharper. As AI shows you the relationship between buying Ralph Lauren and Chobani yogurt, you learn that also there's such a thing as a relationship between this. Also, this is how you're
Yes.
making a relationship. So your brain
Yes.
actually becomes smarter. So
Yes.
it's a
Yes.
it's a it's a symbiotic relationship. We help
Yep.
AI get context of like what a human is and how does a human make decisions and how do humans survive and so on, and what are the fears and etc. And we learn from AI on how these systems make decisions and how they draw relationships across, completely unrelated things and so on. So, over time, we're going to be way smarter than, we used to
Right.
be and so on. So
And
it's
I
like,
think listen, I think that conversation of the fears that AI have, people that have about AI,
yes,
it can go on for a long time,
exactly,
and they're all
exactly.
because they're based on fears. But
Yes.
I do see your point around sort of making you smarter, and I remember when I was a kid, the emphasis on was when I hated math. I hated
Yeah.
math. I just
Yeah.
couldn't stand math, and because I never got the answer right. Well, what I used to do, I used to get points for showing that process how I got to the wrong answer. That
Yes.
was still
Yes.
worth something, right?
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think that's kind of things that AI can help us do is show us the process. So as
Yes.
much as having that right answer is
Yes.
fundamentally important, that
Yes.
journey and process also there's some value in that as well too.
100%, because that process shows you the thinking frameworks, right? So when I
Okay.
was in consulting, we used to apply certain frameworks to be able to operate and get to the correct answer. And those frameworks were designed by humans. You'd adapt frameworks from McKinsey, BCG, and so on, right? Which is cool, but those frameworks are heavily limited. And what you realize that the human brain is just built for bias and prejudice and so on. And
Right.
our brains are heavily relying on bias because they want to increase their processing speed, right? So like you wake up in the morning, I choose a black shirt. You don't think too much because you want to just focus all your energy on spending on thinking on the things that you don't have answers to. So
Right.
if you see a person wearing dirty clothes, you want to immediately assume they're homeless, because you don't want to think too much about
Right. Sure.
what
Sure.
could be the other reason, right? And so on. That's how our brains think, and that's too dangerous in the world of business, even in personal life, because you can make judgment calls on situations or people that are not right, but they're just generalized. They're based on generalized assumptions, and you end up, in the wrong path. Whereas with AI, now AI, you have to have trained your AI system in a way that's not human, that's not heavily, human based, such that you don't have that level of bias. So that's why for us, our AI system is trained on, people from 6,000 different languages. Their way of thinking is extremely different,
Right.
40,000 device types, 190 countries. So you're counting for someone in, China, someone in Brazil, someone in, Mexico, someone in, Austria, and so on. So you have to account for all those differences and find patterns from those differences and nuances so you can be like
Gotcha.
context based when you're
Yep.
generating
Yep.
opinion. So that's the power of AI.
Okay. Okay. That totally makes sense. But I still want to know how you went from being an artist to running an AI company. I
Yeah.
still haven't heard that yet.
Yes,
Like, how'd
yes,
that
yes,
happen?
yes, yes. Exactly. So this is what happened, right? So when I was a kid, I had, kids, they have like many dreams. And you ask kids like, what do you want to be? I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a policeman, I want to be this, you want to be everything, right? So as a kid, in my house, my parents had, a massive music system. We had a phono, we had a massive collections of music from all sorts of artists. In my house, they'll play everything from, the usual Diana Ross to Guns N' Roses to Michael Jackson to so a massive range of music. So, classical music, we listen to like Beethoven, and then we
Sure.
go to like AC/DC, and then you go to like, Diana Ross and so on. So that got me super interested in music. And over time, I started liking music, went to church. When I was in church, I used to do praise and worship when I was younger. And over time, that kind of built my music muscle. But I used to have this blocker, which was, well, I can't record a song yet. I need to have, a good amount of cash to go to a proper studio, hire a proper
Mm,
producer, and, do things right, right? Have a proper marketing campaign, etc., etc. And as a kid, I was like, oh, maybe I can get signed up. When I was a kid, I signed up in a label. And then I read all these things about, nightmares of getting signed to a label. So it's like, oh, maybe I can do independent. So I need to get rich first before I
right.
go independent.
Right. Right.
Then 2020 hit. And when COVID hit, I was terrified. My fear wasn't actually that we're going to die of this disease. My fear was we're going to run out of food because remember the supply chain was heavily disrupted and
Sure.
food, things started to get run out from supermarkets. So it's like we're going to run out of food and people are going to start eating each other, like what we see in movies. So
Okay.
I'm like, so is this it? So are we going to just die like this? And am I going to die having not done everything I used to dream of as a kid? So when we got out of the first lockdown, I was like, first order of business, I need to just do everything I used to wish to do as a kid, just
Yeah.
do it and put it out. First order
Yep.
of business was music, hit the studio, any studio, had a nice friend producers, like it doesn't matter what production quality. We just go in the in
Do
the
it.
in the studio. I had a bunch of songs since I started writing songs since 2016. So this
Okay.
was like 4 years into writing songs, but nothing recorded. So I hit the studio, started recording songs, and every year, from that year of 2020, I made this thing, which is every year I had to do something I'd never done ever, like in my life, and I had to pick off something from my wish list as a kid. So started making music. So I make all sorts of music. So like recently I've been doing a lot of drill music. But
Okay.
like it's weird. It's not necessarily genre based. So it's like singing on drill, and so it's a very different type of music. I do like folk like music as well. Like my
Okay.
song back in my memories and so on. So I make these songs, I just put them out. Surprisingly, I have listeners. But I haven't produced a new song since last year. So
Okay.
because I've been busy with other things, like every year, so like music, and then get into books. I live in LA, so I went out one Saturday. I found a casting call for extras, so
Okay.
I went on the movie scene. I was going there as an extra. But then one person was missing. I wouldn't show up or was sick or something. So I ended up reading a couple of lines. I was like, okay, this is
Okay.
great. Yes, yes. I was like, this is excellent for $200. I was like, great. So for me,
Well,
I
what
like
that
doing that stuff.
what that does, that ties into, and we talk about audacious all the time, and you just try
Yes,
something, you don't know where it'll
yes,
end up, you just go
exactly.
anyways and follow where it takes you.
Exactly, 100%, 100%. So right now I just live like that. I just do things, and just believe that this is your best work at this point in life, and you just put it out to the world, introduce it to an audience, and you're happy with it, right? And you move on from there. So that's my music experience.
Got you, got you. And then as you went through, you sort of landed on sort of an AI company, but also
Yes.
you talk about your book, the book Never Stay
Yeah.
Broke. So I'm curious at how your personal experiences shaped the writing of Never Stay Broke.
Yes, yes, yes. So I recently wrote this book, Never Stay Broke, which is currently out. And I wrote it as a reflection. So I've been reflecting over the last 2 years. Okay, it's wild where we've been able to reach with Razi right now, making all these millions in revenue every year, reaching a nine-figure valuation. It's crazy. It's crazy. In 4 years, the level of explosion you can experience in 4 years is wild. And I was like, well, how did I get here? Who else have I been talking to over time that I kind of shared with them my way of making moves that also succeeded? And I found that, well, there's a pattern. There's a pattern on like my siblings, how I help them get to where they are right now, my close friends who have been able to advise and help to get like massive to massive heights myself and so on. So it's like, well, do I wait, until I'm 60? Because you have this thing, at least I have it, which is like, well, maybe I'm not qualified enough to talk.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. My
I need to
opinion doesn't
wait
matter
until
now.
exactly, exactly. I need to get more experience. I need to be, I need to wait until I'm 60. I have enough stories. And I was like, no, no, no. This is not justice for people who are trying to break through right now. People who are young, or point mid in you're like 20 years into their careers, but they look at retirement. Well, am I going to retire safely and so on? So there's so many people in different conditions. So I'm like, I'll just write from my personal experience, and write the way I perceive the approach of getting yourself unstuck to getting to the life that you've always envisioned for yourself.
Mm.
And it will speak to a lot of people. So the way I got, yes, I was reflecting a lot this year, and I was born in Tanzania, and Tanzania is a country in East Africa, very nice country. And my parents, my dad, started the first electrical and mechanical engineering consulting company in the country.
Okay.
So it was, big guy back then. He was young. He was like 28 when he started it.
So it's in your genes, is what you're telling me. You were destined for
Exactly.
this.
It's in the genes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a conversation like whether entrepreneurship or these things are like hereditary or you can
Right.
learn from them. But anyway, so my dad started a company back in 1981. And
Wow.
my mom was also, so when we were born, these guys were doing very well, right? So my parents were doing very well. We were chartering planes, buying things from Cape Town and South Africa and so on. All this music catalog, we were buying them from abroad. We had like this massive, massive computer at a time that I think there were only two computers in the country, one in our house, one in the bank, in the federal, like the equivalent of the Federal Reserve, right? So very, very wild stuff. We had a library in the house, and the library is how we got exposed to the external world, like primarily. Then of course we had like a bunch of things. 9 years into my life, into my introduction to life, everything came down crashing. So
Okay.
my dad's company went bankrupt, and the way it went bankrupt was a big lesson in macroeconomics that I came to learn as a grown up, which was currency devaluation. So when he started the company in 1981, a US dollar, $1 was equivalent to eight Tanzanian shillings. 20 years later, that was 1,000. Like $1 was 1,000 Tanzanian shillings. So that was a 12,400% in currency devaluation. That's a massive drop. That
Mhm.
wiped 99.2% of his wealth, right? So just, and there's nothing you can do when you're experiencing currency devaluation coupled up with inflation. Even if you increase your prices 10% year over year, you're going to go broke. Even if you increase your prices 20, you're still going to go bankrupt. And
Right.
your
Right.
prices can't increase, your services or product prices can't increase at the same pace as
Yes.
currency devaluation. And you are seeing it in the US right now. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
the dollar lost like 9% of value from last year. You can't increase prices by
Right.
18%. Like you just can't keep
Right.
up. Very
Right.
dangerous, right? So that wiped him out. So we sold everything, and he had like unpaid contracts and a bunch of things like that. So he sold all his properties in the pursuit of fighting court cases to win his unpaid bills and whatever it is. So we
Hmm.
ended up finding ourselves broke back to the village, like his parents' homeland, right? Back in the village. And we became these kids who are like, out of school. So out of school, back in the village, no electricity, no running water, from washing machines and tumble dryers and all that.
Sure. Sure.
Like
Sure.
we had to we got into a life of washing clothes. You take your clothes and you go to a spring, like a
Yeah.
spring in the
Well.
bush, and then you wash your clothes there. Like
Wow.
all the way to like
Yeah. That's
the
humble. Humble. That's good.
1800s.
That's the humble humility right
Like,
there.
oh, that was rough. That was rough. And people in the village would laugh at us because we're like all these big shot people, and and now you're broke. And we started heading cattle, right? So me and my older brother would like head cattle because we're so broke that my granddad's estate, because the estate was massive, but to run the estate, you need money to hire people to head your cattle, to
Yeah.
plant beans and things like that. So we didn't have that money, so we were heading cattle ourselves. We were harvesting coffee ourselves. We're doing everything ourselves, right? And completely out of school. And we were stuck in that phase for what seemed like, 20 years. But it was technically 2 years. But from a perspective as a kid, there was
Mhm.
absolutely no path
Yeah.
out. That was it. Like, you remember, like, you're not going to get out of there because that's your dad's inheritance. So you're not going to leave. Where are you going to live to? Your dad is
Right.
broke in the city, and now you're back in the village. You don't have a future. And my mom was there, like, she's, that's her, husband's land. She can't go anywhere, right? So luckily for us, now the hit that took, people don't, poverty is extremely dangerous because poverty is not about you being broke and you don't have any money. Because you don't have any money, you're forced to live in a certain place, certain part of town,
Yeah.
certain, state in a country and so on. And that place stops exposing you to certain things. If you stop seeing a Rolls Royce, if you stop seeing a Lamborghini, if you stop seeing mansions, you stop envisioning yourself living that kind of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Forget about Rolls Royces. If you stop seeing a washing machine and you start washing clothes at a spring, you will actually stop seeing the value of a washing machine, and you kind of your brain is going to adapt to that life, and you find yourself stuck in that position forever. Because you stop, like our brain only functions as it's exposed to like data,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. That makes sense.
if you stop seeing certain things, your brain will just fall. So before going to the village, we had these dreams. I wanted to run my own company, tech company like my dad, etc. 2 years into the village, I wanted to be a Catholic priest.
Okay.
Because those were the only people with like a motorbike.
I love the motivation.
You know what I'm saying? But you can see how my brain completely collapsed to the ground.
Right.
Everything was, I knew about Herbert C. Hoover, how he went to China and made millions. I knew about John F. Kennedy and the Kennedys, and I knew about all that stuff, and that's what I had as a vision as a kid. But then exposed to the village life for 2 years just humbled me all the way to the
Sure.
ground. I forgot about all that stuff. I just focused on I want to be a Catholic priest, right? So my mom looked at that and she was like, okay, these kids are actually collapsing. So she told us, look, guys, so this is your village estate. However, you guys are out of school, you're heading cattle, you end up, getting to 18, getting married, and and this becomes your life. Do you want that, or should we risk everything, leave all of this stuff behind, and go start a new life in the closest town? We'll be poorer, we'll be like really broke, but at least we'll have agency, and you
Right.
guys can go back into school, and they can start hustling, and we can start building our life from scratch. Because we can't wait for your dad. At that point, my dad had disappeared, right? Nowhere to
Yep.
be found. So I'm like, okay, so we were like, yes, let's leave. And for us, lucky for us, my mom raised us reading a lot of stories in books, Charles Dickens books and things like that. So we're too exposed to like this, hero's journey of like, oh, life started well, everything collapsed, and then you started, the journey back to the top. So we left that
Mm.
village, went to this nearest town. We started renting one room. When people say
Okay.
one room in Africa, they mean like one actual room. Like
Right.
in the US, I was in a one room apartment. It means you have like a kitchen, you have something
Sure.
else.
Yeah. No, no. One room.
Back there's a one room. The mattress is right there. Everything is right. Like you open the door, everything is right there, right?
Yep.
So we started in that life. My mom was earning $5 a month, teaching, people who are not in a formal school, but these, evening classes, things like that. So we couldn't like make ends meet. So the approach that we took, we had like these, sessions in the house. We would sit down, my mom would show us the financials. This is how much I'm earning. This is how much it costs to feed the family. So it is, it's not working. So this is what we can do. We should start a business. So my mom was very good, at cooking because,
Okay.
back in in a good life, we used to have like all this stuff, kitchen machines, books, cookbooks. My mom had Food for 50. So when we went broke, we went with the book Food for 50, which had like all these recipes. So mom was okay, we can make food, but we have to look for, based on the environment that we're in, what kind of, food out of Food for 50 can we make that people would relate to and adapt easily? And the food that we can find ingredients for around this area in the shops. So we picked donuts,
Okay.
and these were like, in that area, like in 200-mile radius from that place, no one even, had heard of donuts, right? Donuts don't exist in that space. What they call donuts is like a normal bun, and then they put a hole in it and they say it's a donut. So real donuts
Gotcha.
didn't exist. So she started making donuts, went to the store, the nearest shop, borrowed, like the ingredients, made donuts, and we started selling donuts at the nearest. So we had like in the village, we started doing that in the village where we had the event that was coming in, and we set up, put out our furniture on the roads, set up the shop selling milk tea and donuts. There was an event for a week. People came in. We sold out the first day. We sold out by 10 a.m. We had sold out everything, and we continued that loop throughout the week. And that's how we got the money to actually leave the village, to go to
Okay.
the nearest town. And at the nearest town, we continued the same pace, started selling donuts at the place where she was teaching $5 a month. And we made that supplementary income that's kind of added to the $5.
Okay.
Did that, we started stacking up other things. Like, okay, we can do donuts. What else can we do? We could
Okay.
sell fish. You can get fish, fried, and then sell it at the nearest market, and so on. So we started stacking up these things based
Okay.
on what was the easiest for us to sell based on the position we're in and the time resources that we had. Then over time, we saw that, okay, this loop is great, but we're not actually going to completely unclog ourselves from this condition. So the optimal path was my mom should go to teachers college,
Okay.
get proper training, become a full-time teacher, government
Oh,
employed,
wow. Yeah.
and then we can actually settle. So we did that. My mom became a formal teacher. We went to another region, which is like a state here in the US, and set up our lives. She was getting $35 a month, at her first gig. And
Very humble.
$35 a
Very
month
humble.
wasn't enough, right? It was very humble, right? But $35 a month with 4 kids, that would last us like, 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks in. So we would actually had to borrow, like food from a shop to finish up the rest of the month. And you get down to $35, you go pay back what you borrowed, then you borrow
Sure.
again. So it becomes this loop of borrowing just for groceries. So like, well, how do we fix this loop? Do our normal gig, cooking, donuts. But at that time, we're like, okay, donuts are actually more, a little bit more complicated to make. So let's make something easier. So we make like certain type of like scones, which are like easier to make, but very, very creative. And my mom starts selling them to the school staff. So this
Okay.
is like an identification of what your target market is. Like I talk
Yes.
to young founders a lot nowadays, and they tell me they want to do AI. I'm like, well, do you have funding? Like, well, how do I get funding? No, 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 no. Forget about AI, forget about software, forget about any of that stuff. The way build the first business is by looking at the resources you actually have right now in your
Yes.
house today,
Yes. Yes.
the skills that you already possess,
Yes.
and the market is you, like, what are you spending your money currently on? What areas, products or services do people in your house spend money on? Do your neighbors spend money on? Do people, if you're on college, do people on campus spend money on? You want to look at your immediate surroundings, and you find that most of the cases actually food, like food, beverages, beauty products, things like
Yep.
that. Don't look down on them. You find that people have, you have a degree, finished college, went back home, you haven't gotten a job, and you're like, well, I'm not gonna be selling like, lemonade, right? But guess what? You're more likely to convert customers who are buying lemonade than you are to convert customers who are buying your app or, software service. So the point here is my mom identified that the teachers in the staff room have a fixed salary, so they have an income stream. They're like, 100. So you have like a good customer base to start with that could
Yep.
help you
Yep.
supplement your income. So we sold scones there, and my sister and my younger brother were going to the same school, so they'd carry stuff for her. Come back from school, we'd make the scones early morning, and so on. That became the loop. And then we're like, okay, well, this is good. That money helped us, supplement our expenses at the store, adding on
Sure.
to the $35. So we started being a bit comfortable, like quote unquote comfortable relative to where we're from. And then we're like, okay, the second problem is we need we need to buy shoes, we need to buy shirts, we need to buy all these things for
Sure.
school. So how do you get off the loop of only paying for your food? So we made a choice. We had like a meeting in the house, and we made a vote that we voted to eat, instead of eating twice a day, we voted to eat once a day so we can crush our expenses. But instead of eating twice a day and the meals are terrible meals, like once
Right.
a day and a relatively good meal, like rice and beans and something like that. And that's what that did is it started cutting our expenses, because the tactic isn't just to increase your income. The tactic is also like
Yeah. Yeah.
how do you
Yep.
strategically reduce your expenses so that you create that buffer from your previous sales, right? So we cut down our food expenses. So we started creating a buffer, because in the loops, they say 24 hours. The first 24 hours you sold, like scones, and you generated, let's say, $10, $20.
Right. Right.
You're not guaranteed to generate $20 the next day by saying scones. So the way you want to do it is, of the $20 I generated, you want to only spend 10 or less, such that if tomorrow you generate 10, it will still be $20 total because you have the 10 from yesterday. So you
Yes.
now create that buffer, which adds security to your weekly loop. So then my mom, on top of scones, we're like, okay, she started teaching after school classes at home, right? Which is, kids who are in the last year, they can come home, get brushed up in math, English, which is, what my mom is really good at. And that's an additional income. Then how do you scale this? So like, okay, now we're getting more kids because my mom became famous for
Right.
that. How do we make more revenue, stable revenue from this? So to create retention, so you have the revenue, which is they're paying for the after school classes, but you
Yeah.
want to create predictability from it. So instead of paying every time they come, we moved to paying once a month. So you're paying a subscription monthly, and then that covers all your classes for that month. So that became repeatability. And how do we scale? Me, at that time, I was really, really good at math in school. So now I started taking over some of the classes. Then my sister was younger than me, started taking over. So my mom was scaling the after
Right.
school kind of quote unquote business by having us supplement, an add-on
Yeah.
to the manpower, right? And that
Jules,
expanded.
sorry, Jules, I gotta tell you, everything that
Yes.
you're saying, it's you're running a business. All the key
Yes.
aspects, and I think that's kind of
Ye-
where you're going with this, but like I'm
Yes.
hearing it, right? Where it's like
Yes.
all the scalability and looking at your profits versus your expenses
Yes.
and
Exactly.
growth and all this sort of, and I'm hearing it loud and clear. And again, it makes sense that you've got an AI company now.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And the transition became then we started to question, like what you do in normal business, it happens in normal, like as an individual, at an individual level. We started looking at which of the things we're doing to generate an
Mhm.
income are taking more of our energy and generating the
Right.
least margin. So food had to go. Like, it takes my mom is tired.
As crazy that sounds, right? Having to make a decision to eat once a
Exactly.
day,
Exactly.
but
So like
yeah,
the making scones is a very hard job, right? The only one person in the entire house who can make scones is my mom, so you can't scale it because she has her own way of doing things, so we
sure.
can't scale it. It's tiring, so she has to make scones early in the morning, and the whole day is packed, and she has after school classes, and the margin is not worth it, and you can't scale it, so it has to go. So we end up stopping to, we stopped that
Wow.
business, and we focused on after school classes because that one you can have more kids. My mom could create the like the quote unquote syllabus, like the way kids should
Yeah,
learn.
yeah, yeah.
Me and my sister, we can mark the kids so she can scale how that operation runs. And we worked that way. Now, I was lucky around that time, I really wanted to help my mom. So I was doing everything, I could to help my mom. But as a kid, you can't get a job, you can't do any of that stuff. So the only thing I had was like school. So I had to make sure I'm like, number one in school, getting all A's, etc. And my dream, if you go back when I was 10 and heading cattle, the way I looked at myself when everyone was laughing was, I never reconciled with reality. So I never accepted the external reality to become like the default, existence. I was like, I'll get out of this place in my dream. I'll get to the best school in the US. And
Yep.
so I was envisioning myself in school in the US. And guess what? Like 7 years from that point, I was in a high school in Iowa, right? Which is wild. So I ended up, it's a long, long story there, but I ended
Sure.
up going to Iowa as an exchange student from Tanzania, and that was an absolutely brilliant experience. Iowa is brilliant. If people haven't gone there, you should. From when you get in a plane that goes to Iowa, people are friendly in that plane. Like it's so
New
nice. I had a great
experience.
experience there.
Yeah.
Um, Stayed there, and then after Iowa. So now, when I was in Iowa, in my mind, I was like, oh, this is it. So this is it. After this, I'm going to get full scholarship, go to a great university, do software engineering, and then get a big job, and then help my mom and my siblings. Well, it did turn out that way.
No, it never does. It never
It
does.
never does. It
It
never
never
does.
does.
So I ended up, I applied and I did get admissions and scholarships to all these great universities. But in the US, it's like $80,000 a year, and they give you, a scholarship of 40,000. Well, how am I going to pay 40,000? And at the point, my mom was giving like $200 a month. I'm like, forget even 5,000, right? So I ended up, packing my bags and going back home, Tanzania. I was crushed. I was crushed because my problem is like I know how many limited opportunities are in the country,
Sure.
and I've been in the US. I've seen how I could expand massively. In the US, I was doing like theater, I was doing speech, I was doing like all these big things, and I saw my potential. Like, I saw how much potential I had.
Sure.
I was like, going back to this place, goodness Lord, how am I going to get out, right? So I started running different businesses, right? So I started with, now one thing I believe in is you can't stay in the house. Like, you're crushed. They say the world like massively beats you
Yep.
completely to the
Yep.
ground.
Sure.
You can't wake up in the morning and stay in the house. So
Yep.
I was so
Yep.
desperate for motion. I would get out of the house and just walk. I don't know where I'm
Yeah.
going.
Do
I don't know
something.
what I'm doing. I just walk because no one
Joseph,
could give me
I
help.
got to tell you, and it's fine. I want to bring it
Yes,
back even to the title of your book, because your
yes,
book doesn't say you'll never ever be broke again. Your book says never
yes,
stay broke, right? So it's not
yes,
that. So it's a recognition that things are going to happen in life, situations are going to take place. We have to respond to, but we don't have to stay there. And so when you talk
yes,
about walking, yes, the
exactly.
situation happens difficult. You don't stay there. You do something, and I think that's
Yes,
really an
you do
important.
something. And even when you
Yeah.
haven't figured out what to do, the book,
Yeah.
can explain what to do. You want to be in motion, right?
That's right.
So
It creates
I
momentum.
it creates momentum and it helps your brain. I don't your brain, like we talk about AI, but the brain is extremely superior. Like if you put your brain in certain environments, your brain will you'll find your way out. So
Yes.
I was so, desperate and broke. I, went door to door looking for a job. No one could give me a job because, I was like, well, do you have experience? 3 years of experience. I didn't have experience and I can't get experience if you don't give me a job. So I ended up starting a graphic design and video production business. I'll do that for weddings, for church events, and things like that. And the problem, I got a lesson in purchasing power and picking the right consumer. Well, people couldn't pay for it. So people would
Gotcha.
pay for weddings, they'll pay like, oh, I'll pay you $100, $50 up front. And then after a wedding, that, well, I don't have, I've run out of money after all this thing. So I don't have another $50 to pay you after editing. So in church, I'll do big things for like church crusades. And then the pastor will be like, well, let's pray for a child Joseph who is doing this business. I'm like, I don't want you to pray for my business succeed. I need you to pay me, right?
Right.
So I ended up quitting that video production and graphic design business. And now I had a skill from the US, which was volunteering. So we had gone to, when I was in the US, the First Reformed Church, had taken us to a mission trip to New Orleans to build houses for people who were affected by Hurricane Katrina. And
Yeah.
that gave me a lot of empowerment that you can actually make a difference even if you don't have a dime.
Sure.
Like,
Sure. Sure.
all you have to do is be useful to someone else, right? So instead of saying, well, I don't have marketable skills, quote unquote, I can't get employed, it doesn't matter. Can you be useful to someone else? It could be for free. It doesn't really matter. Can you be useful to someone else? So it's like, okay, this is what I need to do. So I ended up, the problem that we had in my environment was you have a lot of people who finished college and school. They're very able, capable, young, energetic, but they don't have jobs and they're just sitting at home. They're not doing anything, right? But the parents have land, right? So I'm like, can we get all this land? Can you guys rent us this land for free? I'll get all
Hmm.
your kids, I'll mobilize all your kids, and we'll start doing agriculture and so on. So I started running that. Of course, people are like, oh, it's very, it's very noble, but have you finished school, right?
Sure.
And I was like, okay, these guys, they have this ageist problem. Let me join the UN, right, with the youth of the United Nations Association. Let me join the UN and then run the thing with the UN flag. And that's the move that started making some impact. So with the UN, I was able to mobilize a lot of young people, get all this thing running,
Wonderful.
massively successful, and found myself in Indonesia and other places, and then
Beautiful.
eventually at Lehigh, where I now transitioned from development projects into this world of business, and eventually Ruazi. It's a long, long story there, but the things I lay down in the book, I look at how I reacted to these environments.
Perfect. Very
And
important.
the
Yeah.
biggest, the biggest thing was my understanding of the work done framework. So in physics, in high school physics, we learned about work done, right? So there's this concept of work done, which, the sentence that we used to learn in school was work is said to be done if a force of 1 Newton pushes a mass of 1 kilogram through a distance of 1 meter in the direction of the force. So the formula goes like work done equals force times distance. And the moment of clarity that I got from that framework was, well, it says the force applied to a mass and moves the mass through a distance, but moves through a distance in the direction of that force.
Gotcha.
Which means which means you have this thing when you're struggling, which wake up every morning, I go to work, I have 2 jobs, 3 jobs, or I've been working for 20 years, I don't see my savings, I only have $300 in my accounts, and so on. How is this possible? Well, you're applying effort, but you're not getting any work done, because for work to be done, you need to have understood that if you have the vision you have for yourself, and you're applying your energy, which is your life force, to push your life forward in time, but in the direction of the vision you have of yourself, that's when you start seeing things materialize. But
Gotcha.
if you push, like in physics, if you push a big stone or like a fridge, you're trying to push it forward and then it falls on the left, it's not counted. Even if you go tired, it doesn't count. It doesn't count. So that's the thing that I break down correctly in the book on how you have to have a vision of yourself. By the way, this doesn't mean you're a billionaire, you want to be a billionaire or whatever. None of that stuff matters. It's like, how do you actually envision yourself in the future?
Gotcha.
How do you see yourself? And
That's
then
important.
is
Yeah.
everything you're doing for all your waking hours, is it
Beautiful.
applying energy in the direction of that vision that you have of yourself?
Beautiful.
So you can't
Beautiful.
have a vision of yourself, as like for instance, there's one time I got offered a job as an English teacher in Cambodia because I was very desperate, and I accepted it. But I didn't go because I was like, well, I'm trying to go to the US to run a tech company. This is taking me east to teach
Right.
English. It's not the same direction.
Right. And I think what's really important in that is that you're able to recognize that this works and this doesn't work.
Yes.
Which is important in fueling our decisions.
Yes.
Joseph, we got a couple minutes remaining here, so I want to make sure that we give an opportunity for our listeners, if they wanted to connect with you directly.
Yes.
Where could we send them?
So, first of all, the book Never Stay Broke is on Amazon. You can find it on Amazon, all formats, paperback, hardback, and so on. And then you can find me on social channels. So Joseph Rutakangwa. On Instagram, I'm at @JRutakangwa. On YouTube, it's just Joseph Rutakangwa. You can find me on LinkedIn, Joseph Rutakangwa. You can find me on Twitter, which I don't use as much, but I'm there. It's at @JRutakangwa. On TikTok, which I, again, don't use as much, but I'm there, Joseph.Rutakangwa. So, mostly Instagram, LinkedIn. You can find me on YouTube, Joseph Rutakangwa. You can find my music on Apple Music, Spotify, and so on. Joseph Rutakangwa. So
we'll make sure and put the links in the show notes so people have access to all that. So we'll take care of that and
100%.
hopefully connect with you. I think your story is a powerful one. Audacious is screaming out in every aspect, everything that you've shared, and I think that's wonderful. Whether it's taking chances, was never settling, whether it's taking that first step, all of these things, exploring, taking risks, all of that falls in what we talk about. So I do appreciate those insights. And I want to thank you for being a guest on the Audacious Living podcast, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast. I loved it.
Good. Back we are here on the podcast, and much thanks and appreciation goes out to Joseph for being here. If you're someone who's been working hard but still feeling stuck, here's the key takeaway from a conversation. Effort alone isn't enough. Your effort must move in the direction of the life that you're trying to create. Sounds easy, right? But it's simple, but that's really what it's all about. What I love most about Joseph's story is how intentional he was. Every setback became a strategic decision point. Every obstacle became data. And every move he made was aligned with the vision he held for his life and future. That's the kind of thinking that shifts people from survival to sustainable success. Joseph reminded us that being broke isn't the problem. Staying broke in mindset, action, and direction, that's the real danger. Think of your life like pushing a heavy stone. You can push it with all your strength, but if you're pushing it sideways instead of forward, it won't count as real progress. True growth happens when your energy moves in the direction of your purpose. If this conversation resonated resonated with you, I encourage you to connect with Joseph. Check out his book, Never Stay Broke, and continue learning from his journey. Of course, the contact details in the show notes below. And if today's episode challenged you or inspired you or helped you see your path differently, do me a favor, like, share, and leave a review, because your audacious growth doesn't just change your life, it creates impact for everyone around you. Until next time, keep living your best audacious life ever. Take care.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion. My words got power, my thoughts have action. Motivation, stay gracious. That's greatness. Be audacious.